Defined benefit pension transfers 2025. Should you transfer out or should you keep? Okay, my name is Dominic James Murray, CEO and founder here at Cameron James. I've been founder here for 8 years and I've been in the industry for 14 years. So when it comes to DB pension transfers, I've pretty much seen the entire landscape since these things have been happening. Important to know right from the beginning, here at Cameron James, we work as part of a two-advisor model, which means that we advise on the underlying investments, the solution, the risk profile, etc. The suitability of the advice is always done by the pension transfer specialist who's authorized and regulated to provide that advice. Right, now let's get into it. Okay, so if you're considering or still considering to transfer your pension or DB pension pot in 2025, the simple answer from the beginning is the majority of people in this time now will be advised to maintain their DB scheme. Why? Well, it's pretty simple when it comes from an economical perspective. Who in their right mind as a pension transfer specialist can say, yes, I recommend you, when there's no extenuating circumstances, I recommend you to leave your safeguarded benefit plan, which is guaranteed to pay you an indexed income for the rest of your life, CPI, IPI, whatever the factors are in your scheme, compared to transferring it out to something like a SIP that has absolutely zero guaranteed growth inside the plan. Now, we all know the S&P 500 over the past 30 years has done circa 10% per annum. However, there's no guarantee it will continue to do that. You could have a lost decade with the S&P 500 as happened previously, in which case the money might not have grown so much. And if the S&P 500 isn't doing so well, generally speaking, other global markets might not do so well as well. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, that sounds horrible. If pension transfer specialists are always advising people to maintain the scheme and there's no guaranteed growth inside a DC scheme, why are people still transferring DB schemes? Well, why they're wanting to transfer DB schemes? This comes down to independent situation. I was dealing with a client just last week, having a conversation with him. He's now retired from the night shift that he was working for 35 years. He came through the pension transfer specialist of us maybe 3 years ago and transferred a DB scheme of circa $500,000. He's now taken himself off nights and he stopped working and he's now taking below 4% from his DC pension pot with us as a general drawdown rule from the pension pot each year. His life has changed dramatically. He would not have been in a position to retire from his scheme, from his employer, if he didn't have his DB pension pot out, as he wouldn't be able to have the income from it until a certain period of time. He also has a different strategy. In the first however many years of his retirement, there's certain things he may want to do, may want to achieve, may want to go on holiday, may wish to do the conservatory, etc. Again, with a DB scheme, whilst it's defined and it's safeguarded, you do not have flexibility over the income that you receive from that scheme. Of course, the pension transfer specialists go through all of this with you in detail, but it just goes to highlight how everyone's situation is different, but also sometimes there's the empirical thing, which is correct from a data perspective. It is not in your interest to transfer your DB scheme because you cannot guarantee the growth you're going to have outside. But that is obviously the empirical factual data, which the pension transfer specialist legally has to go through and do. There's also the emotional perspective of it though, that clients have lives, clients have things they maybe want to do. Somebody might have ill health running throughout the family. Not enough for a pension transfer specialist to say, if you don't have serious ill health, they're not really going to consider it. If you say, oh, both my parents and my brother and my uncle, everyone died from heart disease, it's not enough for the pension transfer specialist to say, oh, well, on the possibility of you maybe getting heart disease when you're older, we advise you to transfer out. So again, I'm getting a little bit into the weeds in terms of DB advice and what the pension transfer specialist will go through. But the main thing to remember is you will be advised not to transfer your pension pot. So you really have to ask yourself from the outset, in my professional opinion, not that many clients go through an advice process. Unfortunately, this is maybe not the way the legislation was set up. I do not see that many clients going through a DB advice process and literally waiting for the end report as if like, I cannot wait to see what this report says. It's going to explain to me what I should do with my life. That's not the case. 90 to 95% of the people I see who are wanting to do a DB pension transfer are understanding the report's probably going to be negative and they want to proceed with it anyway, which is technically called an insistent client when it is the pension transfer specialist themselves who is allowing the client to go against the advice report. When it's not, we work as part of a two-advisor model. So technically it's not an insistent client, but for all intents and purposes, the same as an insistent client wanting to proceed against that advice. Sometimes you do get clients who will go through the regulated and authorized advice process with the PTS. They'll get the final report and then say, oh, wow, this has really highlighted it to me. I was dead set on transferring this. Now that I've looked at the annuity rates in the market and what I would need in order to replace my safeguarded asset, I would actually like to keep that DB pension scheme. Now, That's a massive positive outcome in my opinion. A client has gone through a regulated and authorized advice process, they've made a big financial planning decision, and probably they'll keep that decision for the next 30 years. The only downside to that is they've paid the initial non-contingent DB advice charge to have obtained that advice, but I still think it is a positive outcome because a client, you probably don't need to go and get that same advice a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later. So if you want to have a conversation with myself or one of our senior financial advisors about DB reports, the pension transfer specialist and how it all works, you can use the calendar link below to find a day and a time which is suitable for you. Yes, there are non-contingent charges for DB advice reports, but any initial conversations you have, Zoom calls, telephone calls, emails, none of it is charged for. We put you in an informed and educated position for you to make a decision on whether or not you wish to obtain authorized and regulated advice or not. Now, I cannot talk about DBs in 2025 without talking about CETVs. Now, a lot of clients at the moment are saying, oh, well, maybe I'm going to hang on because look at what the government's doing with the base rate. They're bringing the base rate down, so my CETV is going to go up. Kind of somewhat. There's a loose relationship there. But CETVs are not based on the base rate in the UK. They are based on the 20 and the 30-year yield. That's what's important here. Now, I'm sure my team can put it up on the screen for you. It doesn't always work in the same way. The UK government brings down the base rate. Statistically speaking, empirically, that would normally relate to also a drop in the 20 and the 30-year gilt rates. However, with what's going on in the world at the moment, Labour coming into power in the United Kingdom, Trump winning again in America, everyone is going on record to say we will be borrowing money and we will try to be expanding our economies. So actually, the 20 and the 30-year gilt rates have been going up, despite the fact that the UK government and most central banks are bringing things down in terms of a base rate. So I always advise on the side of caution. People who try to time their CETVs or waiting for a better one, it is a risky, risky game. You cannot predict and you cannot control which way the 20 and the 30-year gilt rates are going to go. The reason I talk about the gilt rates is, and again, in my experience, I'm not a pension transfer, I'm not an authorized and regulated pension transfer specialist, whilst I do hold the relevant qualification to be a pension transfer specialist. In my experience of reading CETVs from the scheme, the biggest factor that affects the cash equivalent transfer value is the 20 and the 30-year gilt rate. Now, if we were in a world where it is guaranteed you could obtain authorized and regulated DB advice for the rest of your life, that's a slightly different situation. Because you can say, okay, I can get advice now, I could get advice next year, I could get advice in 10 years' time. As CEO and founder of Cameron James, I'm recording in December 2024. Can I guarantee that we will be able to work as part of a two-advisor model in January 2025? No, I cannot. Anything can change in the industry. There's numerous pension transfer specialists that we've worked with who have simply pulled out of the market. It's too expensive. There's too much legislation. The compliance cost is too high for them to provide this advice. Now, is that likely going to happen? No. Normally, we have a lead time where we understand that the provider is going to change. But over the course of the next 2, 5, 10 years, it's very unpredictable what the availability of DB advice will be. As such, if you are somebody who wants to obtain authorized and regulated DB advice, it would be my advice to meet with a pension transfer specialist and understand the conversation with them. Again, when you start having a conversation with a pension transfer specialist, you're not locked in. Generally speaking, you're only locked in for the charges once they begin all the time and the effort and the analysis of your DB report. So not that I'm trying to scare people, oh, if you don't do it now, you're not going to be able to do it later. But what I've seen in my tenure as CEO, the fixed advice report cost for a DB scheme, I remember it was introduced at £500. And I went, oh my God, clients are never going to pay this. £500 for an advice report, possibly VAT? This is astronomical. 8 years on, the average advice cost report now is £3,500. That's a massive increase over the course of 8 years. Now again, in the context of your financial planning, it's not really that important. If you have a £500,000 or £1 million or a £2 million DB pension pot that you're considering to transfer, whether you've paid £500 for the advice report or £3,000 I should say for the advice report, it's neither here nor there, but the costs are getting more expensive. And people who say, oh, it's all a racket, I should be able to do what I want with my pension transfer specialists are here to mop up and make the money. Well, if they're here to mop up and make the money, why is the pension transfer specialist market not growing? Why are more and more people pulling out of the market? Because they can't be bothered. It's not worth the scrutiny from the FCA for a lot of the pension transfer specialists to continue in the industry when you can do all other areas of financial planning which are far less scrutinized than DB pension transfers. So again, I would just say that obtaining DB and qualified, authorized, regulated advice is not a buyer's market, it is a seller's market in my experience as CEO. And I would not like to see clients who think a DB pension transfer may be in their best interest, holding out and holding out and holding out until a point where actually unable to obtain advice, or possibly the cost of that advice has become even more extortionate than it potentially is now. Guys, I hope that's been a useful wrap up for you on 2025. Where I think CETVs will go in 2025, it's very difficult to comment right now. In normal times, base rate coming down should lead to higher CETVs, but the current political environment, very much more difficult to predict. If you have any questions or you want to speak with our team, use the calendar link below, or also you can use the WhatsApp link to get in touch and understand how we can help and how we will put you in touch with the pension transfer specialist. And as always, take care with UK pension assets.